Hello and welcome back to Round the Table, your slow TV English class from the Meeting Point, broadcasting not only to Bilbao but throughout the world. This week our conversations were on the topic of diets, and coming up in this programme, of course, we've got your typical mistakes for this week. We've got some quite amazing facts and some not amazing but quite interesting facts. We've got a big pronunciation thing, which is not that important, but it's something that you might like to listen out for. And of course we've got our celebrity guest speaker with a very interesting talk on the topic of diets. So let's begin with some typical mistakes from this week. The first thing is breakfast, lunch, dinner. Don't use them as verbs, okay? I'm not saying that you will never see it, but it's quite uncommon in modern English. So normally you would use the verb eat or have. We have breakfast in the morning. We have lunch at 2 o'clock. Don't say we lunch at 2 o'clock. You might hear it in very old writing, maybe from the 1920s, or maybe some very posh people might say it, but it's kind of unusual these days. So don't use the meals as verbs, use the verb eat or have. Another one is this one. People use last when they should be using latest. If you're talking, for example, technology, which we weren't, but imagine you were, you could talk about the latest technology or the latest model of iPhone, for example. It's the latest, meaning the most recent. Well, you could say the most recent, but not the last. The last, it would be there are no more. It is finished. So my favourite example would be if you were talking about a film with an actor, you could talk about Meryl Streep, for example. She's still alive. You could talk about her latest film because we presume she's going to make some more in the future. But if you talked about an actor that was dead, say John Wayne, you could talk about John Wayne's last film. The final one that he made before he died would be the last film, yeah? But if someone's still alive, the most recent one would be their latest film. So that's why we talk about the latest technology, because more technology will be coming. And another important phrase is in recent years, not in the last years. In recent years, in the same way. It's the ones closest to us today, but they're not final in any way. Sometimes we talk about last Tuesday because that's kind of finished and it's in the past, or last week, yeah? So those are finished and in the past. But in recent years or in recent times. Another popular phrase, now this one is incorrect. It has passed the same thing, has passed the same thing. Another one that people say, which is slightly better but still wrong, has happened the same thing. That's still wrong. The correct form is the same thing has happened. Okay? The same thing is the noun, has happened is the verb. Okay? So it goes noun, verb. Don't switch it over. I don't know why people do it with this particular sentence, but people love to put this sentence in the wrong order. The same thing happened. Outlet is an interesting word which has recently transferred from English into Spanish. But usually when a word is loaned from one language to another, it doesn't take on the full meaning, or the meaning can alter slightly, which often creates a false friend. So in Spanish, the word outlet is usually like a synonym for a sale. In English, it's not exactly that. An outlet is really a way for a product to reach the public. Often you see a factory outlet, which is a shop which is often connected to the factory. Sometimes it's separated and it's in the town centre, but it's to cut out the middleman, as we might say. So it is a shop that is owned by the factory, and they often sell things which are reduced because they are what they call seconds. They have slight flaws in the product, so they're not 100% perfect. So they tend to sell them a bit cheaper. That is why a factory outlet is often cheaper than when you buy the product in a normal shop, because the quality isn't quite what it's supposed to be. We can also talk about fast food outlets. Now, people think this is very strange because they know the word outlet and they think it's to do with sales, like I say. So if I say McDonald's or Burger King are fast food outlets, or there is an increase in fast food outlets in Bilbao in recent years, people think it's a very strange thing. But all it means is a place where the product can reach the public. You can also use an outlet for things like creativity. So you might take up painting as an outlet for your creativity. You have creativity inside you and you need to let it out. So you find painting is a good outlet for your creativity. Or you might take up singing, because that would be a good outlet for your emotions. So emotions also need an outlet because you can't keep them inside. So outlet, when you see it in English, it might not be exactly the same as the one that you borrowed into Spanish. But it's a very interesting word, I think you'll agree. So I told you last week that we would be talking about intrusive letters. We were talking about how we don't normally hear the R when it's in combination with another vowel. When we have a long sound like we can say her, and there's no R on the end. You just get this long sound. So if I say her father, you don't hear the R, but the R will reappear if the following word begins with a vowel. So if I say her uncle, you get that R reappearing at the beginning of the runkle sound. Her father, her uncle. You see the R reappears. And the same thing happens with car door. Car door. You don't hear the R on car door, on the car or the word door, or the word or, car door. But if I say car engine, you hear that R again. Car door, car engine. Now they're not really intrusives. A real intrusive is where the R appears where it never existed to begin with. Now quite often if we have a word that ends in a vowel and then the new word after begins with another vowel, we quite often put a sound in between to separate them. So with a word like idea, it's got that on the end, and we'll quite often squeeze in a little R. If I say the idea is, you hear that I'm putting a little R in between. Now this isn't necessarily that common. Americans, Irish, Scottish, they don't do it. The rest of us do. As I said, there are things called rhotic or rhotic accents, and there are non-rhotic accents. So we tend to do it as especially Southern English people. The idea is, we say. Now, it might not be something that you have to copy, but it's something you should be aware of in case you hear it. So that's one form of the intrusive R. You get another one. If we look at words like door, pour, war, they all end in an R, which you don't hear. And of course, if I then follow it with another vowel, that R will reintroduce itself. Now sometimes with that or sound, we can also do it with words like law, which actually has the same sound. Now, because we get accustomed to reintroducing the letter R, like pour another glass of water, pour another, you hear the R. Now, we might also introduce that same R in law and order, but law doesn't end in R, but we still get in the habit of reintroducing it after that or sound before another vowel. So sometimes we say law and order when we're not really supposed to, but you'll hear that R reintroduced. That's an intrusive R. And there's another one on the same sound, draw, which again actually ends in a W, but if you're not looking at it written, it could end in an R because it makes that sound, that same or sound, draw. If we put ing on the end, a lot of people say drawing, and you hear that little R appear. Instead of a W in the middle, it sounds like there's an R in the middle. Drawing. You see? It's not something you have to do, but it's something you should listen out for. It's a very interesting thing. There is an intrusive W as well. Like if we have a word that ends in a W, cow, there is a W pronounced, I suppose, on cow. But if I say cow and calf, the W is much stronger when I put it in front of the and sound, cow and calf. And if I have a word like tomorrow, maybe you can hear the W on the end. But if I say tomorrow morning, you might not hear that W as strongly, tomorrow morning. If I say tomorrow evening, that W might be stronger. Tomorrow morning, tomorrow evening. You see, it's stronger. And again, sometimes there's the O sound at the end of a word where there was no W, like on the end of potato, for example. There isn't really a W there, but we pronounce it in the same way as tomorrow, potato. So you might hear people say potato omelette with a little w on the wom, potato omelette. Tomato and cheese. You hear that little W that's reintroduced there. Well, I say reintroduced because in some contexts it would be reintroduced, but this intrusive, it never existed in the first place. Okay, so those are intrusive sounds. They are sounds that are supposedly reintroduced, but quite often just introduced where they never existed to begin with. Again, as I say, it's not something you have to do, but it's a very interesting bit of pronunciation anyway. He has a temperature. Why do we say that? We should say he has a high temperature if he has a fever, but everybody says he has a temperature. Everybody's got a temperature. Why do we say that? Okay, you want some amazing facts about food? How about this? It says here, more than 1/3 of adults worldwide are overweight or obese, and poor diet is the leading cause. So that's 1/3 of adults in the whole world. That comes from the World Health Organization. So that is a fact. And here's something from the British Medical Journal, which is a very well respected medical magazine. Ultra-processed food now makes up over 50% of the average diet in many Western countries. 50% of the food is ultra-processed. That's pretty amazing that people are eating such rubbish these days. It's amazing. And here's a shocking one from The Lancet, another well-respected medical magazine. Poor diet causes more deaths globally than tobacco, alcohol and drug use combined. That is pretty amazing. People are dying because of the food that they eat. That's quite incredible. A plant-based diet can reduce the risk of heart disease by up to 32%, says the American Heart Association. And children who eat dinner with their families regularly are more likely to have better academic performance and mental health. Yes, we've discussed that before. Sitting around the table with the family results in much better outcomes for those children. And again, it's another one of those correlation, not causation. It's the type of family that sit around a table and eat a meal together are a different type of family. They tend to pay more attention to their children and check their children's homework, have more relationship with the schools, etc. So it's not necessarily a causation thing. And with relation to meat eating, animal agriculture is responsible for 14.5% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And reducing red meat consumption by just one serving per day can lower the risk of premature death by 13%. I don't know how they calculate these things, but there you go. We are eating too much red meat. There are facts here. Now here is another thing which is not amazing, but it is quite interesting. It came up in conversation last Friday. If you eat too many carrots, your skin goes orange. Well, I can think of a famous politician at the moment who maybe eats too many carrots. But anyway, there is a condition called carotenemia. Yes, carotenemia makes you go orange. Carrots are rich in beta-carotene. That is the pigment there, beta-carotene. And if you eat a lot, it does make your skin go orange. It builds up in your body. And no, it's not dangerous at all. If you stop eating carrots, you return to your normal colour. So watch out for those politicians with carotenemia. Here we have an interesting etymology. Somebody was asking me about the origin of the word dairy, as in milk products. Dairy, because it looks a bit like daily and it looks a bit like diary, so they thought there must be some connection. But no, the root goes back to the word daye, and it looks very strange, this word, but apparently it's pronounced daye, which was a female servant, especially one who was making bread or working in the household. And then this word changed to dairy, which referred to the place where this day worked, especially in the room where the milk was processed. So where they had the milk and they made the butter and the cheese, this room then took its name from the person, which gave us dairy, as it was pronounced. And then from the room, it then transferred to the products that were made in the room. So the milk, the cheese, the butter, and then the yogurt all became known as dairy products. But originally it was the female worker. That's the origin of it. Just a couple of quick quotations on the topic of diets. Here's one from Alfred E. Newman. We are living in a world today where lemonade is made from artificial flavours and furniture polish is made from real lemons. Indeed, we are living in a strange world where people eat all kinds of strange things that have never seen a vegetable in their lives, yet have you ever been to the shampoo department in the supermarket? You can get shampoo with honey, shampoo with coconut, shampoo with real almonds, even beer in your shampoo. Yet people will consume all kinds of strange food that have never been near a vegetable in their lives. Here's another one from Anne Wigmore. The food you eat can either be the safest and most powerful form of medicine or the slowest form of poison. The slowest form of poison. This goes back to our conversation on risk. We don't assess risks so well when they're in the long term. These things accumulate inside us. And if you eat a lot of sugar, fat, salt, etc., the effect isn't immediate, so we tend not to notice it so much. We don't consider it a danger. It accumulates inside us. And one final one, Michael Pollan says, home cooking is the single most important thing you can do for your health. This is very true. During the week we discussed the benefits of various diets, and it is obvious that some diets are very, very unhealthy. But scientists have travelled the world looking at longevity and visiting societies and communities where people live a very long life. And they've looked at some and they said, well, these people eat a lot of fish. Well, it must be fish that makes you live a long time. But then they visit another community where nobody ever eats fish and they also live a long time. The only common theme that they can find is that all these people cook at home and they don't have processed food. So really, it's not what you eat, it's what you avoid. Just avoid all the processed stuff. They say that if you look at the ingredients on the packet, if there are things in the ingredients that you do not understand, don't eat it. Personally, I'd rather buy a bag of carrots. You buy a bag of carrots, you might notice there are no ingredients listed on the packet because it just comes in a bag and it contains carrots. I mean, it's not rocket science, is it? Now it's time for a very interesting lecture from our celebrity guest speaker.
The phrase, "you are what you eat," highlights the strong connection between diet and health. Although diet plays a major role, other lifestyle factors like physical activity, sleep, stress levels, and social habits also have a significant impact on our overall well-being. What people eat every day influences their energy levels, mood, and long-term health outcomes. In modern societies, there is a clear relationship between social class and diet. Healthier food is often more accessible to middle or upper class families who have more time, resources, and knowledge. In contrast, many people with lower incomes rely on cheap, processed foods due to financial and time constraints. Nutrition is rarely taught properly in schools, and public health messages often fail to reach those who would benefit the most. Magazines, documentaries, and cooking shows usually target an audience that already shows interest in healthy eating. This creates a polarized food culture, with one group focusing on organic produce and the latest superfoods, while another depends heavily on convenience foods and takeaways. Fast food has developed a poor reputation due to concerns about low nutritional value, high sugar and fat content, and links to obesity. At the same time, it remains popular because it is quick, cheap, and easy. In households where both parents work long hours or where there is limited cooking knowledge, fast food may seem like the only realistic option. This situation becomes especially worrying when it affects children. Feeding children a diet high in sugar and processed food can lead to health problems later in life. Discussions have even emerged about whether this could be considered a form of mistreatment. Similar debates surround vegan families who choose to raise their children without animal products, which requires careful planning to ensure nutritional balance. Over the last decade, there has been a rise in vegetarian, vegan, pescatarian, and flexitarian diets. Many people are now reducing their meat intake for health or environmental reasons. These options are becoming more mainstream and accepted. While trends and opinions on diet continue to change, no single approach suits everyone. Instead of following strict rules, the focus could be on encouraging home cooking, improving food education, and making healthy choices more accessible. These habits can lead to better health outcomes across all areas of society.
Kissing is an important life skill that everybody needs to perfect. At the University of Kissing, we teach you basic kissing techniques, such as the historic art of hand kissing, or the even older ancient Greek art of statue kissing. We then give you the opportunity to practice your skills on animals before getting in some face-to-face practice with your classmates. In our more advanced courses, we take the art of kissing out of the classroom and into the open air, and finally into the shower. Whether you are expressing your love for your partner, your baby, or your money, at the University of Kissing, we have a full range of kissing courses designed for you.
I hope you enjoyed that humorous little advertisement there. If any of you want to make your own silly advertisements, there are free video downloads from Pexel's video library, a source of a great deal of interesting footage. I'm sure there will be more silly advertisements next week. But that's all we have time for this week. The topic for next week will be communication. I'm sure that will be fascinating as usual. So if I don't see you in the meeting point this week, have a good week. Till next week.